Hi everyone, Miss Patsy here at Castile Innovation Lab. Today we'll be reading from our booklet called Earth Changes, and today's story is going to be about the San Francisco earthquake in 1906, an eyewitness account. That means that it was written by somebody who was actually there, and this story is about her experience. So grab your booklet, a pencil, and a highlighter, and let's get started. The San Francisco earthquake of 1906, an eyewitness account by Emma Burke. At 5:12 a.m. on April 18, 1906, residents of San Francisco, California were jolted out of their beds by the first shock of a violent earthquake. More than a century later, this quake still ranks as one of the most significant geological events of all time. Emma M. Burke, who lived on Waller Street near Golden Gate Park at the time of the earthquake, published this account of her experience that fateful day. I highlighted more than a century later, this quake still ranks as one of the most significant geological events of all time because that's an important detail about this event, stating that it is one of the most significant geological events of all time. Significant meaning that this earthquake was sufficiently great or important and worthy of attention. No one can comprehend the calamity to San Francisco in its entirety. The individual experience can probably give the general public the clearest idea. I was one of the fortunate ones, for neither personal injury nor death visited my household, but what I saw and felt I will try to give to you. In this paragraph, the author starts by saying that no one can comprehend the calamity. On the side margin, I wrote calamity, which is defined by causing great and sudden damage. It was 5:13 a.m. and my husband had arisen and lit the gas stove and put on the water to heat. He had closed our bedroom door so that I might enjoy one more nap. We were in a fourth-story apartment flat, said to be built with unusual care. This paragraph describes what they were doing at the time the earthquake hit. Think about what you are normally doing at 5:13 in the morning. Are you awake or, like the author, enjoying more sleep? In this paragraph, she mentions that they lived in a fourth-story apartment or a flat, said to be built with unusual care. What do you think unusual care means? Keep that in mind because I think that will be important information later in the story. Paragraph 3. 12 flats so constructed occupied a corner 1 block from Golden Gate Park. All our rooms, 6 in number, opened into a square reception hall from which the stairs descended. This describes the location of their apartment by Golden Gate Park, their building, and how all the apartments opened into a reception hall with stairs. The shock came and hurled my bed against an opposite wall. I sprang up, holding firmly to the footboard, managed to keep on my feet to the door. The shock was constantly growing heavier. Rumbles, crackling noises, and falling objects already commenced the din. Paragraph 4 describes how the earthquake felt, like a shock, and hurled her bed against the opposite wall. I circled shock and hurled because they were very descriptive words to describe what happened. Have you ever been shocked by something? Has your bed ever been hurled or thrown against the wall on the other side of your bedroom? How strong would someone or something need to be to do that? She then sprang up and held on to the footboard and managed to keep on her feet to the door. I'm sure you've all sprang up out of bed at some point, maybe on Christmas morning, but have you ever had to hold on to the footboard or the part of the bed by your feet because you couldn't walk to the door without falling down? That was the only way that she could, as she puts it, keep on her feet or stay on her feet. The shock was constantly growing heavier. Rumbles, crackling noises, and falling objects commenced the din. What do you think commenced the din means? Circle the words commence the din and write in the notes that commence the din means to begin or start of a loud, unpleasant, and prolonged noise. The door refused to open. The earthquake had wedged it in the doorframe. My husband was pushing on the opposite side, and I pulled with all my strength, when a twist of the building released it and the door sprang open. This paragraph says that the door refused to open. Have you ever been trapped somewhere? How did that feel? How do you think the author felt? How do you think the author felt when the door sprang open? How much force do you think it is necessary to twist a building? We braced ourselves in the doorway, clinging to the casing. Our son appeared across the reception room, and my husband motioned to him to stand in his door also, for fear of the chimney. I circled brace because in case you needed to know what that meant, that means to support, and cling means to hold on tightly. In this paragraph, she describes how they brace themselves in the doorway, clinging to the casing. What picture forms in your mind? Do you know what it means to brace yourself or cling to something? A brace is something that gives you support, and when you cling to something, you hold on to it tightly. Then her son appeared across the reception room. How do you think he felt with all this shaking going on and being separated from his parents? The author's husband motioned to their son to stand in his door for fear of the chimney. Why do you think they were afraid of the chimney? I think it was because with all the shaking, the chimney could fall on them. Do you have a chimney in your home? And if it fell, what would it fall on? Paragraph 7. It grew constantly worse, the noise deafening, the crash of dishes, falling pictures, rattle of the flat tin roof, bookcases being overturned, the piano hurled across the parlor, groaning and straining of the building itself, broken glass and falling plaster, made such a roar that no one noise could be distinguished. Can you imagine something growing constantly worse? Can you imagine dishes crashing, pictures falling, bookcases being turned over, pianos flying across the room? How about a building groaning and straining? Can a building groan and strain? What do you think the author meant? We never knew when the chimney came tearing through. We never knew when a great marine picture weighing 125 pounds crashed down, not 8 feet away from us. We were frequently shaken loose from our hold on the door and only kept our feet by mutual help and our utmost efforts. The floor moved like short, choppy waves of the sea, crisscrossed by a tide as mighty as themselves. The ceiling responded to all the angles of the floor. I never expected to come out alive. I looked across the reception room at the white face of our son and thought to see the floors give way with him momentarily. How a building could stand such motion and keep its frame intact is still a mystery to me. This paragraph describes the chaos of the earthquake, chimneys and heavy pictures crashing down, not being able to hold on to the door, and she said that she only kept our feet by mutual help and our utmost efforts. Keep your feet is an idiom which means to keep your balance or to avoid falling. She then says that the floor moved like short, choppy waves of the sea. Can you imagine seeing that? Many people describe seeing floors and streets move like waves during an earthquake. The next sentence says that the ceiling responded to all the angles of the floor. What do you suppose that means? Do you think the ceiling actually spoke to the floor? No, I think she was describing how the ceiling moved along with the floor. So when the floor moved, the ceiling moved also. Through all this, the author did not think that she would come out alive. Do you think she was scared? Stand in front of your clock and count off 48 seconds, and imagine this scene to have continued for that length of time, and you can get some idea of what one could suffer during that period. Do you think that 48 seconds is a long time to go through something like that? My husband told me to dress quickly and get down our tortuous stairs to the street. I rushed to the window and saw my neighbor of the lower flat standing in the middle of the street in her nightclothes, clasping her little babe in her arms. I called to her and asked if I should fling out some bedclothing to wrap them in. She said her husband had gone into the house to get their clothes. The street was black with people, or rather white, for they were mostly in street undress. In this paragraph, I circled tortuous because I thought that was a weird word to describe stairs. It means full of twists and turns. It made me wonder if it was the earthquake that made it twisted. She saw her neighbor in the street in her nightclothes. Often in the early 1900s, people didn't really have jammies. They mostly slept in their underwear. Can you imagine being so scared that you would go outside of your house in your underwear? Then I turned to dress myself. What a change in values. I had no thought for the dress I had cherished the day before. I was merely considering what was warmest and most substantial. A coarse wool skirt and a long coat lined with white silk and highly decorated with trimming. Did I choose the latter because it was pretty? No, indeed, but because it was warm and long. My diamonds and money were thrust into a hand satchel, and we hastily made our way to the street. In paragraph 11, the author writes about how her values changed after the earthquake. The day before, she put on her most cherished dress because she wanted to look her best. But that day, she threw on a wool skirt and a coat because they were warm and long, and she didn't care if it was pretty. After a half hour, we came up to our flat to take an inventory of the situation. I walked over to the remains of my choicest china, porcelain, and cut glass without a feeling of regret or a sigh or a tear. Everything seemed so insignificant and the world so far away. That is the world we had lived in. All estimates of value were annihilated. Human life seemed the only thing worth consideration. In this paragraph, they went back to their apartment to survey the damage. She wrote that after seeing all of her belongings broken and damaged, she did not feel regret or sadness because everything seemed insignificant or unimportant. Her ideas about what was valuable were utterly destroyed because now she realized that life is the only thing worth thinking about. Because this story is an eyewitness account, there aren't a whole lot of facts or statistics to remember, but more of a descriptive story so that you know how the author felt. Now that you know what the different phrases mean, go back and reread the story and see if you can imagine what it would be like to be there. I hope you enjoyed today's reading. If you found anything interesting about the reading, or if you were able to imagine yourself back in that time, let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next time.